too, one would see a huge rock coming curving through the upper air above the smoke clouds and go plunging down through the roofs. Fire broke out, and columns of flame and smoke rose toward the sky. Presently the artillery concussions changed the weather, the sky became overcast, and a strong wind rose and blew away the smoke that hid the English fortresses. Then the spectacle was fine. Turreted gray walls and towers, and streaming bright flags, and jets of red fire and gushes of white smoke in long rows, all standing out with sharp vividness against the deep leaden background of the sky. And then the whizzing missiles began to knock up the dirt all around us, and I felt no more interest in the scenery. There was one English gun that was getting our position down finer and finer all the time. Presently Joan pointed to it and said, "Fair Duke, step out of your tracks, or that machine will kill you." The Duke d'Alençon did as he was bid, but Monsieur de Lude rashly took his place, and that cannon tore his head off in a moment. Joan was watching all along for the right time to order the assault. At last, about 9 o'clock, she cried out, "Now! To the assault!" and the buglers blew the charge. Instantly we saw the body of men that had been appointed to this service move forward toward a point where the concentrated fire of our guns had crumbled the upper half of a broad stretch of wall to ruins. We saw this force descend into the ditch and begin to plant the scaling ladders. We were soon with them. The lieutenant general thought the assault premature, but Joan said, "Ah, gentle Duke, are you afraid? Do you not know that I have promised to send you home safe?" It was warm work in the ditches. The walls were crowded with men, and they poured avalanches of stones down upon us. There was one gigantic Englishman who did us more hurt than any dozen of his brethren. He always dominated the places easiest of assault, and flung down exceedingly troublesome big stones which smashed men and ladders both. Then he would near burst himself with laughing over what he had done. But the Duke settled accounts with him. He went and found the famous cannoneer Jean le Lorrain, and said, "Train your gun! Kill me this demon!" He did it with the first shot. He hit the Englishman fair in the breast, and knocked him backward into the city. The enemy's resistance was so effective and so stubborn that our people began to show signs of doubt and dismay. Seeing this, Joan raised her inspiring battle cry and descended into the fosse herself, the dwarf helping her and the paladin sticking bravely at her side with the standard. She started up a scaling ladder, but a great stone flung from above came crashing down upon her helmet and stretched her, wounded and stunned, upon the ground. But only for a moment. The dwarf stood her upon her feet, and straightway she started up the ladder again, crying, "To the assault, friends! To the assault! The English are ours! It is the appointed hour!" There was a grand rush and a fierce roar of war cries, and we swarmed over the ramparts like ants. The garrison fled. We pursued. Jargeau was ours. The Earl of Suffolk was hemmed in and surrounded, and the Duke d'Alençon and the Bastard of Orleans demanded that he surrender himself. But he was a proud nobleman and came of a proud race. He refused to yield his sword to subordinates, saying, "I will die rather. I will surrender to the Maid of Orleans alone, and to no other." And so he did, and was courteously and honorably used by her. His two brothers retreated, fighting step by step toward the bridge, we pressing their despairing forces and cutting them down by scores. Arrived on the bridge, the slaughter still continued. Alexander de la Pole was pushed overboard or fell over and was drowned. 1,100 men had fallen. John de la Pole decided to give up the struggle, but he was nearly as proud and particular as his brother of Suffolk as to whom he would surrender to. The French officer nearest at hand was Guillaume Renaud, who was pressing him closely. Sir John said to him, "Are you a gentleman?" "Yes." "And a knight?" "No." Then Sir John knighted him himself, there on the bridge, giving him the accolade with English coolness and tranquillity in the midst of that storm of slaughter and mutilation, and then bowing with high courtesy, took the sword by the blade and laid the hilt of it in the man's hand in token of surrender. Ah, yes, a proud tribe, those de la Pole. It was a grand day, a memorable day, a most splendid victory. We had a crowd of prisoners, but Joan would not allow them to be hurt. We took them with us and marched into Orleans next day through the usual tempest of welcome and joy. And this time there was a new tribute to our leader. From everywhere in the packed streets the new recruits squeezed their way to her side to touch the sword of Joan of Arc and draw from it somewhat of that mysterious quality which made it invincible. End of Chapter 27, and end of Volume 1, Book 2 of Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc.